Carol and I have been married for 15 years and have a 14-year-old daughter named Patty. Carol is 36 years old, and I am 39 years old. My name is Ken. We married when she was 20 and planned for her to become a housewife because I earn a sufficient income in my profession. I oversee a research laboratory at a multinational electronics company. We believed that there were an excessive number of single parents and wanted to provide assistance to our daughter in any way we could. We attend the gym, and Carol is in excellent physical condition. She offers to spend time with our daughter, who typically assists at school. She graduated from a 2-year college. She attended a 2-year college because she anticipated that she would marry and believed that she did not require extensive schooling. She reasoned that it was unnecessary to expend her parents' financial resources if she was planning to marry and remain at home for the majority of the time. We reside in a comfortable suburban home and frequently host gatherings for our neighbors. There are 2 such events nearly every month, which prevents individuals from engaging in risky behaviors. It is still safe to drive to one of the parties, as the house is only a few blocks away. Jake, the proprietor of several local bars, spent a considerable amount of time with my wife. He was relatively new to the neighborhood. He owns and operates an upscale lounge and bar that is highly profitable. He took over his father's tavern and built an expensive lounge as a side business. The enterprise proved to be a success. I went over to check what was happening in their group. Jake stated to Ken, "I'm trying to hire your wife to work at my restaurant, but I believe she's just bargaining for more money. She is quite attractive, and I will pay her a considerable amount for her services. Carol is not an employee. She is currently in my room. This is not related to the club, it is related to the Stardust Lounge, where she will serve behind the bar, meet people, and present herself in an attractive manner. I will remunerate her generously." Carol approached us and stated that she needed to be home to provide Ken with slippers and a newspaper when he returns from work. She then giggled, grabbed me, and we promptly departed. Jake could be heard stating, "Damn it," in response to the situation. "You may arrange your schedule as you see fit." We excused ourselves from the group and proceeded to the snack table, where we found a sandwich prepared by the others. We were seated at the table with Ben and Jill when Jill proposed that we accept his offer. "This is an excellent place to work, and I am confident that he will provide a competitive salary." Carol changed the subject, and we all proceeded to order drinks. Drinks were consumed and dancing commenced. There was a considerable amount of flirtation with women at the parties. It is my understanding that such behavior elevates their spirits and helps them feel needed when someone other than their husbands pays attention to them. As far as I am aware, nothing got out of control at the gatherings. There was probably no harm done. I also enjoy flirting with ladies. I have kissed several of them at parties over the years. In fact, the interactions might become quite intense at times. Now, I try to switch partners and avoid flirting with the same girl twice in a row so that she does not suspect that I am attempting to seduce her. I observed Jake and Carol dancing. He remained at Carol's side for the majority of the night while they conversed in a low voice. Throughout the course of the party, he was unwavering in his pursuit of her. I was aware that she would not consent, and I was resolved not to allow her to work in the lounge. Once we returned home that night, we engaged in sexual intercourse in accordance with our usual routine. The following 2 weeks unfolded without incident. When the next party arrived, I was preparing to go fishing, while Carol was occupied with another matter. That week presented a challenging situation with Patty. I encouraged her to attend a social gathering and allow herself to unwind, emphasizing that her well-being would likely benefit from a change of pace. She responded with a negative, but I suggested she consider my proposal, citing her preference for not attending parties without my company. Upon my return on Sunday night, we retired early, having spent the day fishing and consuming alcohol. On Monday night, we went out to supper with Patty. Carol informed me that she had attended a party and had enjoyed herself. She spoke quietly, presumably to avoid disturbing Patty, who was listening. We did not engage in sexual intercourse on Sunday night, so we did so on Monday night after Carol went to bed. We lay on the couch cuddling, and then she began talking to me. "Ken, do you think I believe that working at the lounge would be enjoyable for Jake? It would also be beneficial for me, as it would allow me to get out of the house and meet new people, rather than remaining cooped up indoors all day. Furthermore, it would provide an opportunity for me to inquire about your day, rather than you inquiring about everything that happened to me." Additionally, it would assist with Patty's education. As we could save more money than we do now, Carol, you are aware that I am a financially stable individual and do not require assistance in accumulating wealth. In fact, we have already set aside sufficient funds for Patty's college education, rendering further savings unnecessary. Our current financial situation is satisfactory, and there is no need for alterations. You are averse to any changes in our lifestyle, yet we have undergone a significant transformation. At the time of our marriage, I was amenable to the idea of pursuing this opportunity. If it did not work out, I could always resign. It seems like an enjoyable prospect. Furthermore, I will always be there for Patty and you when you return home. I believe that work will revitalize me and make me a better lover. During the week, we discussed work and I presented all of my justifications against working there. We do not desire money, men will hit on her, they'll ask her to work unusual hours, men might add something to her drink. We argued back and forth. She presented all of the grounds in favor of the position, including extra money, which could be used to purchase a yacht or take a trip outside the United States. A trip outside the United States would allow us to purchase some new, additional items. She loves me and will never cheat on me, and she will not drink in the club. You will eventually find yourself drinking in a club, so I advise you to reconsider your decision. If you get caught up in something, you will have to face the consequences. From where do you acquire these ideas? This isn't New York, so it won't happen here. She expressed jealousy that I would be interacting with both prominent males and attractive females. We conversed for a minimum of 2 hours, and at each juncture, I articulated the notion that it was a highly unfavorable proposition. In response, she asserted that the fundamental issue was my lack of trust in her. Consequently, she became visibly distressed, leading to the decision that she would work from Tuesday through Friday at 11 o'clock. The time is 12 a.m. The hours of operation are from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Furthermore, he would ensure that she would still be home when Patty got back from school. Jake guaranteed her that she would receive at least $1,100 every day, or he would pay the difference out of his own pocket. He will remunerate her with a base salary and the remainder will be tips from lounge guests. Carol would service the lunch crowd and have the evenings free. This made her happier than ever a few months later. On each subsequent occasion that we went out, new guys would approach us and speak to Carol. They embraced and kissed her. These were the guys who came to the lounge to eat and knew her from before. They ignored me. They stood next to her, one hand on her buttocks, massaging it as they talked. She derived a sense of significance from the fact that several prominent businessmen had recognized her and paid attention to her. She introduced me to them, but it was evident that they did not desire to meet me, and I was not disconcerted. Our collective interest was centered on Carol. I was reluctant to acknowledge it, but Carol was monopolizing the attention of the men. Subsequently, at one of our social gatherings, I was informed by several attendees that Jake had been accompanying Carol throughout the event. When I went fishing, he repeatedly urged her to work, assuring her that she would excel in her duties at the lounge, receive a competitive salary, and attract new customers to his establishment. He asserted that it would be a mutually beneficial arrangement. It was evident that this would be a mutually beneficial arrangement. I observed Jake spending a considerable amount of time with Carol at the party, and she frequently expressed her disbelief. I was intrigued by the nature of their interaction but was aware that she would not divulge any information. As far as I was aware, she was thriving in her professional endeavors and had recently opened a bank account. With the funds available for discretionary spending, she purchased several elegant black cocktail dresses for professional attire and exuded a striking appearance in them. Additionally, she acquired a few coordinating bras. From my conversations with her, I learned that she received considerable gratuities, exceeding her expectations. Jake, on the other hand, did not possess to fulfill the $100 per day requirement they had planned. I inquired with a few individuals if they had any knowledge of the matter. However, none of them offered any information. Given that it has only been a few months, it may be advisable to wait a little longer before taking further action. Carol spoke about the club as if she were the proprietor, providing a detailed account of its operations. She provided a detailed account of the club's operations, including the number of patrons, their activities, and the identities of key personnel. While I was not personally acquainted with many of the individuals she mentioned, I was familiar with several of their names. The lounge experienced a notable surge in popularity during the evening hours. Jake, too, was a source of income, as was his club. When I answered the phone at night, there were numerous instances of dropped calls, which was becoming increasingly bothersome. Carol stated that the calls were for Patty and that the boys were refusing to speak to me at all. I initially believed her, but she and Jake had engaged in too many discussions at parties that I was unable to hear, leading me to conclude that I contemplated installing a recording device on the line for an extended period. However, if Carol or Patty were to discover my actions, I was unprepared for the potential consequences. I ultimately decided to proceed with the purchase of a recording device and its linkage to the telephone line. Following a 2-week monitoring period of Carol's phone lines, I observed that numerous of the men attending the club were contacting her via telephone to request a dinner invitation. They expressed gratitude for her hospitality, noting that it would be inappropriate for her to decline. They suggested that her response would be different this time, given her employment status and reputation for effective performance. She never explicitly declined their requests, her responses were consistently polite. It is likely that she enjoyed the attention, regardless of its nature. I did not monitor Patty's calls, and I promptly forwarded them to Jake. He contacted her each morning with the intention of engaging in conversation. He also initiated sexual advances. I believe he attempted to persuade her to work one night a week at the club so that he could replace him and close it at night. He stated that he indicated that he would not assign this task to anyone else but her. Additionally, he invited her to the lounge in the evening for a drink as a gesture of appreciation for her exemplary performance. When she expressed reluctance to attend alone, he encouraged her to bring a friend but did not instruct her to bring her spouse. He did not mention me to Jake. She was somewhat indirect with me about her plans, but she had not yet attempted to visit the lounge alone or with her friends. Until Jill's birthday, a banquet space in the nightclub had been reserved for her celebration. 12 females were headed to the party. Jill was turning 40, and they planned to surprise her. Jake mentioned that the venue would be provided free of charge. He even offered a dancer if he would not perform himself. He stated, "I'm afraid that if I take my clothes off in front of you, you'll leave Ken for me." Of course, she joked about it, but she stated that she would have to examine the matter further before offering an opinion. She then informed him that there would be 12 girls at the party. Jake informed them that the banquet hall had its own restrooms, so they would not need to visit the lounge or dining area at all. There were numerous jokes, but it is unclear if they were all intended as humor. Carol was prepared to attend the party. She was dressed in her attire for the occasion and appeared to be quite pleased with herself. She arranged for her attendance after work, which was nearly 6 o'clock. At 7 p.m., she was departing to conclude the remaining preparations. The scheduled dining engagement was set to commence at 7 p.m. The event commenced at 8:30 or 9 p.m. with a performance, followed by a celebration scheduled between 7 o'clock and 11 p.m. After she departed, I accompanied Patty and her friend Nancy to a meal and subsequently transported them to their residence. I informed them that I needed to stop by my place of employment and then ascertain the well-being of my mother, as I was concerned about her returning home in an inebriated state. Patty kissed me farewell, and I proceeded to the lounge, arriving at 8 o'clock. Upon entering the establishment, one encounters a coat room before another set of doors, which lead into the bar. The bar is situated in front of the coat room and spans approximately 50 feet in length. At the far end of the bar, there are 3 bartenders stationed. Additionally, a door leads into the kitchen. A small games area, utilized for card games, is situated on the side of the pub. The pub includes 12 booths, which are used for drinking and dining. Between the booths and the bar, there are 8 tables with 4 chairs each. 4 chairs were positioned on either side of the entrance to the banquet room, which was situated between 2 booths. The dining area, which could accommodate 125 people, was located beyond the booths. It was estimated that approximately half of the seating capacity was occupied. The author proceeded to the end of the bar and observed the older men's game area, where they were engaged in a game of gin rummy while being monitored. I proceeded to consume the beverage and subsequently entered the room, locating a seat on the opposite wall with a direct view of the banquet hall doors. From this vantage point, I was able to observe the entirety of the bar area, encompassing tables and booths. The room was predominantly dark, with only a minimal overhead light source positioned over the table and the illumination from the television. I recall standing at the entryway and being unable to discern the individuals within the playroom due to the lack of visibility. The men engaged in card games were largely. The room was populated by elderly Italians, and the television was broadcasting a soccer match between Italy and Spain. I engaged in conversation with a few of them, and they appeared kind and hospitable. The elderly men who spoke loudly appeared to have hearing difficulties, as they responded positively to every joke and appeared to enjoy themselves. They all had nicknames, including Fish, Wolf, Lame, Hippie, and Money. I observed the clock on the wall and noted that it was nearly 8 o'clock. At approximately 30 minutes before 9 p.m., I observed a cart being transported from the kitchen to the banquet room, where ribs were being prepared. I heard the wolf say, "Carol is hosting a party at the banquet hall tonight, and you should visit her." He also stated that I would never allow my wife to work next to that sexually aroused Jake, and everyone laughed. I observed Carol entering the bar from the banquet area at approximately 9:20 p.m. She was attired in a bright red cocktail dress, which made her look particularly attractive. Gypsy observed her and said, "Carol will come up to me to say hello because she is madly in love with me." This was met with general laughter. I was filled with a sense of unease and wondered how I could possibly extricate myself from the situation. I located a couple of unoccupied booths and assumed that if I remained in my position, confident that Carol would not notice me as I observed her having a drink at the bar. I noticed a man approach her and, after wrapping his arm around her, give her a strong hug and kiss on the lips. She spoke with him for approximately 10 minutes before another man walked over and repeated the process for another 10 minutes. Subsequently, the subject exited the premises, indicating that the program was to commence. Approximately 30 minutes later, another individual vacated the room, and the women were audibly vocalizing their objections through the door. This amused the men at the card table. I then observed Jake entering the room and taking a seat in the booth situated in close proximity to the door. I informed myself that I did not wish to be noticed by him. The wolf responded that he was Jake, but he would not approach me. I had embarrassed him in front of his girlfriend, and he was upset with me. I was gratified to hear Carol suddenly reappear and spot Jake. They exchanged kisses and hugs, and she sat in his booth. From my vantage point, I had an excellent view of the scene, and I observed that the two were holding hands. The wolf then made a conjecture, "I bet Jake will seduce you tonight." The woman was quite attractive in her attire. The man had been pursuing her for more than 3 months, which was the longest he had ever gone without getting her into bed. Carol then proceeded to return inside after. She was observed hugging Jake and kissing another man at the pub. She then proceeded to apologize for having to leave, point at the room, and subsequently depart. This pattern continued throughout the night. She alternated between spending time with Jake and being groped by a patron at the pub. The men stood next to her, hugging and rubbing her. Each time she approached Jake, he reciprocated with a kiss and embrace, while also touching her buttocks. By midnight, the party had reached its conclusion, as the female attendees began to depart, leaving only 4 individuals in the room. The room's doors were open, allowing for observation. Jake and 3 single males entered to dance with the female attendees. From my observation, Carol consistently carried a beverage with her when she left the premises and returned to her room. It is likely that she had consumed a sufficient quantity of alcohol to reach a state of inebriation. The women were dancing in close proximity and appeared to be enjoying themselves, as they were visibly intoxicated. The bar had ceased operations at 2 a.m. The time was 12 a.m. Given that it was now only 10 minutes before closing time, I decided to go outside to my car to avoid any potential embarrassment. I remained in the vehicle until approximately 20 minutes after 2 a.m., by which time the majority of attendees had already departed. A taxi arrived, and 4 female companions and Jake exited the vehicle. The 3 women entered the taxi and drove away, leaving Carol standing alone. Upon my arrival, Jake promptly returned to secure the premises by locking the door. He then sounded the vehicle's horn, prompting Carol to lean in my direction. I informed her that I anticipated her to be moderately inebriated, which prompted my visit to ensure a safe return. Jake was scheduled to escort me to the diner for breakfast. I would inform him of this shortly and then follow him to the restaurant. Jake approached as he was finishing the task of locking up. They conversed at length before arriving at my vehicle. Jake informed me that I did not even trust my wife to venture out at night, and that I should check on her. He suggested that a woman could not even go out alone without her husband following her around. Was I afraid that she would be taken from me? Carol stated, "I don't want her to die driving home drunk or being hit by a drunk driver. We aren't intoxicated, we will be all right. Ken, do not worry about us. I will be home shortly." I turned on my car and drove away. She has made me quite angry at home. I drank 4 beers and changed clothes. I went to bed at 4 o'clock. The time was 12 a.m., and she had not yet returned. I was concerned that I would be unable to sleep, but I do not recall even touching the pillow. I awoke at 10 a.m. With a minor hangover and no evidence of her having retired to bed, I proceeded to take a shower. Upon emerging from the bathroom, I discovered Carol asleep on the couch with a glass of water and a prescription medication nearby, presumably in case she became unwell. The girls were already in the kitchen and inquired as to why their mother was sleeping on the sofa. She was still attired in her red dress and covered with a couch blanket. I proceeded to prepare eggs for the girls and then cleaned the kitchen. Carol entered the room with a grin on her face, and the children questioned her about her presence. She proceeded to sit down on the couch, adjacent to my coffee cup, and proceeded to drink from it. She informed the children that she did not feel well following the events of the previous night. The girls proceeded to laugh at her, as I poured her a cup of coffee and returned mine. I subsequently exited the room, still visibly upset. I was reading the Sunday paper when she approached and sat down at my feet on the floor. I apologized, stating that I was likely too intoxicated to think clearly. "I should have gone home with you." We proceeded to a diner, where I ordered a trucker's lunch, which was more than I consume in a month. I ate it, but I felt terrible within 20 minutes. We stayed there until I was feeling better. Then he drove me here. I slept on the couch to be closer to the restroom in case I needed it. The phone rang, so I got up and left the home to wash the car. I spent the entire day outside working in my garden. I decided to go to Jake's house and tell him what I believed. He was at the pool when I arrived. When I entered the house, Jake stated, "Who do you think you are to speak to me in that manner last night?" I apologize for my behavior last night. I consumed too much alcohol, and I was upset about the situation with one of the waiters. He is dealing with an ex-girlfriend who has been harassing him. She obtained a protective order against him, and he was at the club last night, causing her trouble. I had to intervene and break them up. I believe I was just reacting to you with displeasure. I'm sorry for my outburst. Ken, you are a good person, and Carol is also a very kind woman. I hope you understand why I spoke with you for so long. Then I went home. Jill arrived at 6 o'clock. At 12 a.m., I accompanied Carol to the lounge to retrieve her vehicle. She returned at 1 a.m., and I proceeded to consume my evening meal while viewing television programming. Carol then entered the residence and asserted that she was preparing to retire for the night. I did not engage in any form of communication with her, and she subsequently proceeded to the bedroom. I retired for the night at 11 p.m. At 00, she was already asleep. I awoke early and did not wake her before leaving for work. I was eager to listen to the phone tapes and ascertain what Jake and she had discussed that night when I arrived home. I proceeded to switch on the tape, whereupon Jake immediately began, "What the hell was he doing? I'm following you and keeping track of everything. I observed him in the parking lot throughout the night, awaiting your departure with another individual. I should have contacted the authorities. In the year 2004, we are not in the 1930s. His actions constitute harassment. Women have the right to work and to control their own bodies. If you wish to work for me on a full-time basis, you would be compensated accordingly. The remuneration you would receive is approximately $60,000, which is more than many men make. I am perplexed by the tendency of some men to abuse and attempt to dominate their spouses." Carol began to defend me, but Jake informed her of a series of additional claims, and she soon began to concur with him. I was uncertain if she was doing this to appease her superior or if she genuinely believed him. I will ascertain her true beliefs when I speak with her, but I did not speak to her. I am now aware of the complexity of the situation I have created for myself. I proceeded upstairs, where Carol and Patty arrived. I returned home without explanation. Upon returning from school, I greeted Patty but did not address Carol. She simply ignored me, and I reciprocated. I consumed a beer and proceeded to watch television. Carol informed me that dinner was ready, and we proceeded to eat while conversing solely with each other. Patty washed the dishes while Carol cleaned the kitchen. Patty then excused herself to visit a friend. I initiated the computer to ascertain my email and news updates. Half an hour later, I accessed the webcam site to view potential companionship when I observed Carol seated. I observed her from the couch, giving her a grin without uttering a word. After a period of time, she began to speak. Perhaps you require another woman whom you can command and control. Can you find one on your website? She seemed to understand how to truly irritate a man. What do you mean by that? Carol stated, I believe we need to be apart for a while. I'm going to visit my sister for a few days. I'm not sure when I'll be back, if at all. I turned and glanced at her, then I shut off my computer. I proceeded to take a walk. I felt the need to leave the house, otherwise I would have acted out on her. I should have gone to Jackie's house, removed his head from his body, and placed it in his rectum. When I arrived home an hour later, I discovered that her vehicle was no longer present, and there was a letter on the table instructing Patty to contact her mother and Alice's residence. When Patty called her mother, the latter offered to take her from school and stay with her sister for a few days. Patty retired to bed, and I proceeded to consume a beer. I sat in contemplation for some time. It was evident that I could not ascertain her well-being while she was in Alice's house. Consequently, I was compelled to consider my options. I had 7 weeks of vacation remaining, which I might utilize if necessary. I anticipated that she would return home to escort Patty to school and procure additional attire for the following day. This would be the final communication from this location on Monday. I proceeded to my place of employment and requested to take a vacation. They granted my request. I consulted with my acquaintance Rick and inquired if I could utilize his bicycle for a period. He replied in the affirmative. Despite my affinity for the item in question, I have placed it in my yard, along with the keys. I proceeded to a neighborhood gas station, then to Rick's house, and finally to a diner for coffee. I retrieved the recording device and played it back. She informed Jake that he is angry with me and does not speak to me at all. I became enraged and determined that we needed to spend some time apart. I am staying with my sister. Perhaps he needs another woman to dominate and control. Jake stated that as a bartender, he is accustomed to dealing with difficult customers. He is adept at discerning individuals who exhibit characteristics he deems undesirable. Kent exemplifies such a person. They derive pleasure from exerting control over their spouses and dictating their actions. They engage in abusive behavior toward their wives, viewing it as an acceptable form of conduct. It is unfortunate that you have experienced this. How have you managed to cope with him over time? I am unsure. It is plausible that he has exhibited these tendencies since the beginning. You were too enamored to recognize it initially. It is not uncommon for men to display such behavior from the outset. It is beneficial that you became aware of it. Now, I have an apartment that you can stay in. Your sister can simply notify him about your whereabouts at all times. Additionally, you may invite Patty to stay with you on occasion. I am currently seeking an individual to oversee the operations of the club in my absence. The manager will be on vacation, and I require someone I can trust to collect the revenue and deposit it into the bank account to prevent any significant financial losses. I do not currently have anyone I can rely on for this task, and I am willing to offer a substantial remuneration. Regarding the time job, I am willing to offer it to you. I must admit that I am not currently aware of all the details regarding Jake. Everything seems to be moving too quickly for me right now. We can discuss it further when you arrive at work on Tuesday. They said goodbye, with Jake stating, I love you. I went to her work on Tuesday and saw her depart at 3. At 10 o'clock, I accompanied them to pick up Patty from school. I then followed them home, where they remained for approximately 2 hours. Patty subsequently proceeded to meet her sister. I returned home and provided Patty with nourishment. Patty remained unaware of my whereabouts. I informed her that I would be occupied at work and would see her the following morning. She bade me farewell with a kiss. I then examined the recording to ascertain whether Carol had spoken with Jake. I heard them arrange to meet in the lounge at 9 o'clock. Subsequently, he was obliged to escort her to the club and demonstrate the correct procedures to be followed there. He once more alluded to the apartment, suggesting that it would be more conducive to her well-being to reside there than with her sister. Carol rejected this suggestion but indicated that she would consider it. I recall watching a baseball game in his apartment after the scheduled game in town was cancelled due to inclement weather. He then informed me that this was his private space, away from his wife, and that it was a wonderful two-bedroom apartment. The bedroom apartment had been expanded to include a spacious games area, which had been constructed by removing a wall. This area was furnished with a 52-inch television, 3 sofas, and numerous large, comfortable chairs. On Friday, Patty had a school play at 7 o'clock. The time was 10 p.m. On the evening in question, the time was approximately 7 p.m. Carol stated that she would endeavor to be present. I listened to the taped phone calls on Friday as Carol was packing her belongings. Jake explained that she must have consumed the drinks too rapidly since she fell asleep on the couch as soon as they arrived at the apartment. She stated that she felt terrible the next day and will exercise more self-control the next time. I hypothesized that the individual in question placed something in her drink. She stated that she would like to visit the location again in the future. Carol left for work at 4 p.m. that night, and I arrived at school at 7 p.m. At the play, I observed Carol enter and take a seat with her companions. She noticed me and waved, and I reciprocated. After the play, I approached Patty and inquired if she would like some ice cream, which she agreed to. Carol then approached and complimented Patty on her performance. I informed her that she needed to return to work and that I would contact her on Saturday. I then excused myself from the conversation and informed Patty that I would meet her in the car. We proceeded to an ice cream establishment, after which I drove her to the residence of her acquaintance Nanny, where she was staying for the night. I arrived at the club at 12, the time was 12 a.m. The time was 12 p.m. Subsequently, I observed Carol and Jake's vehicles. A period of 3 years elapsed until they were reunited with 4 other men and 2 dancers. Jake then proceeded to escort her to the vehicle and open the door for her, after which he kissed her. They subsequently departed and proceeded to the diner for breakfast at 5 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, Carol visited her sister. On Saturday, Carol came to visit Patty and accompanied her on a shopping excursion. Carol gestured to me from the yard and vocalized a greeting, but I chose to ignore her. They subsequently returned, and Carol proceeded to drop her off at her destination before resuming her work at the club. Patty inquired about Carol's current circumstances, and I informed her that her mother was experiencing a state of confusion due to her employment. She was involved with the wrong individual and was allowing him to influence her in ways that were detrimental to her well-being. As she was working the evening shift, I returned to my place of employment, but I continued to engage in the same pattern of behavior. When I arrived home from work, I would prepare dinner for Patty and myself and then check on Carol. Carol had recently moved into her own apartment, and Patty I made an unannounced visit to the residence. I observed the activities of the residence when Jake and Carol were not present. I proceeded to the rooms where the elderly individuals typically congregate. Gypsy commented on Jake's inability to seduce Carol. Wolf retrieved Polaroid photographs of Carol's breasts from behind the counter and presented them to me. The same sequence of events occurred. Following the club's investment, the group dispersed, with each individual returning to their respective vehicles and proceeding to their respective residences. I observed Jake attempting to persuade her, but she rejected his advances. One evening, I noticed her walking out with a group of individuals. Jake followed me, so I turned and proceeded to circle the block. As they both entered an apartment complex, the office light was activated. Approximately 10 minutes later, the light in her bedroom was illuminated for approximately 5 minutes while she changed her clothing. It then went out. The light in the kitchen was activated, and it is believed that she was preparing eggs or drinking. Half an hour later, the light was deactivated, leaving the only light that remained on was the one in the office. I observed Jake descend the stairs, enter his vehicle, retrieve his camera, and return to the apartment. An hour later, he deactivated the light and departed for home. I proceeded to our location to ascertain whether he would leave the camera in the vehicle. I was fortunate to arrive at my residence to retrieve a Slim Jim. At 4:30 in the morning, I proceeded to Jake's residence and observed his vehicle. I remained at the scene for a period of time before entering the residence and retrieving the camera, which I had brought with me. I proceeded to my residence to download the images, after which I returned the camera to its original location. Upon returning to Jake's residence, I observed that the images captured depicted the subject under the influence of an intoxicating substance, while the photographer documented the scene. He then proceeded to move her and place her in various states of undress in approximately 20 locations. It appeared that half of her was asleep, while the other half was uncertain, but I had been aware of this from the beginning. She had her eyes closed in all of the images. I was not particularly outraged, given that she had chosen to engage in these activities rather than listen to me. However, I was aware that I needed to address the situation with Jake. I had the impression that anyone who took advantage of someone in this way would face consequences. I believed that Jake enjoyed socializing on Friday nights and that this prepared him for the Saturday night gatherings we hosted in the neighborhood. Consequently, I anticipated that he would arrive at the club at approximately 2. At approximately 2 a.m., the first patrons began to leave the establishment. It is customary for the venue to remain open until after 3 a.m. At approximately 220, he informed them of his intention to leave. He and Carol subsequently departed, transporting both vehicles to her apartment. As I observed them from the apartment, I noted the illumination of the living room, followed by the kitchen, and finally, the bedroom. The time was now 20 minutes to 3, for approximately half an hour. The light was then extinguished, and I could see them moving through the curtains. Subsequently, all the lights were deactivated, with the exception of the one in the I observed them moving around in the bedroom. I could see both of their figures moving past the curtain. I am unsure of their exact actions, but it appeared as though they were both naked. I have been carrying a digital camera since I saw Jake taking images of her in the nude. There was no movement for 15 minutes. I assumed that they must already be engaging in sexual intercourse. I am now extremely annoyed. I wish I had a firearm instead of a camera. I retrieved my camera and proceeded towards the house, traversing the street. I observed a discarded item on the roadside that required disposal. It was a Channel 4 advertisement, approximately 6 inches thick and 18 inches long. I contemplated the potential benefits of breaking down the door. Upon entering the house, I observed 3 alarm panels displaying numbers from 1 to 3. I deduced that the house was equipped with an alarm system. I proceeded upstairs, taking 2 steps at a time. I proceeded up the stairs at a brisk pace, taking them 2 at a time. As I did so, I found myself contemplating the layout of the room. Upon breaking down the door, I informed myself that I wished to capture her image, so that I might forever cherish that look. I paused at the door and listened intently, hoping to discern any sound. However, I heard nothing. I believe I listened for at least 5 minutes. My intention was to capture them in a compromising position. I was unaware that they were aware of my presence on the stairs. Jake contacted the emergency services and provided a description of the situation while I was on the landing, listening to the sounds of sexual intercourse. The police were already en route. I struck the door twice with a piece of angled steel, and it opened as if a truck had driven into it. I proceeded towards upon entering the bedroom, I observed a source of illumination emanating from beneath the door. Upon opening it, I encountered Jackie, attired in shorts, engaged in conversation with the operator via a mobile telephone. She was also in possession of a paint roller, the only item of clothing she was wearing. It became evident that the apartment had been decorated by both Jackie and the operator, as there were several paint-related items scattered across the floor. These included a paint roller and 2 brushes, which were contained in a container. I attempted to document the scene with a camera, but it would have been more prudent to capture my own image. I advanced towards Jake, who threw the phone away with his left hand and, in his right, a flashlight with 3 batteries, which he waved in my direction. The flashlight struck my left wrist as I raised my arm to defend myself. My wrist was broken, but I was unaware of this at the time. I grasped Jake with my left hand and threw him onto the bed. I struck him 3 times, and then everything went dark. The police then proceeded to apprehend me, utilizing excessive force. I was subsequently restrained with handcuffs and transported to a medical facility for evaluation. During this process, I sustained a fracture, which was treated with a cast. While in custody, I was examined by medical professionals and deemed fit for return to jail. However, I was informed that I retained the right to contact my legal counsel. I am currently serving a sentence of 1 year. I remained in custody, contemplating the unfortunate series of events I had orchestrated. Jake's legal counsel arrived at my cell to discuss the matter. He informed me that the vehicle in question had an order of protection against me, and I was advised to maintain a distance of at least 300 yards from the individual in question. He further clarified that if I wished to avoid any further legal complications, I would be required to sign a legal document attesting to my willingness to refrain from contesting the divorce proceedings initiated by Carol. I duly signed the document and was released approximately half an hour later. To facilitate my departure, I was required to sign a legal document attesting that I would not contest the divorce from Carol. I was subsequently charged with assault and trespassing. I signed the document and, approximately half an hour later, I was released with a cast on my arm. I located the bicycle where I had left it and observed that Jake's vehicle was still present. It was likely that he was repairing the inexpensive door I had installed on my motorcycle. I proceeded to Rick's residence, where he drove me to my vehicle. I then drove home, but Carol's vehicle was present in the driveway. I parked at Jack's house, situated nearby, and awaited her departure so that I could consume alcohol. Sue observed me and inquired about the situation. I collided with the door, and the incident did indeed occur. However, I anticipate that my account will be met with skepticism. I was provided with sustenance, and we engaged in discourse. I informed them of my difficulties with Carol, but I did not divulge the entirety of the story. We discussed a range of topics, and nothing of significance was discussed. They stated that they would dine at 5 o'clock. If Patty and I desired to attend, it was their opportunity to host a gathering. I thanked them and informed them that I would return for dinner and the festivities. I was weary of fast food, and I sensed that Patty shared this sentiment. I surveyed my residence and observed that Carol's vehicle was no longer present. I proceeded to drive home. Upon arriving, I noticed that the front door was ajar. I entered the house and discovered Patty in the company of her friend Nancy, seated at the kitchen table. Patty inquired, "Father, what is the meaning of? Your mother has accused you of losing control and of being abusive. She is filing for divorce. She also claims that you have beaten her and that you are too controlling and dominant. She states that you broke into her apartment, kicked down the door, and almost killed her boss. The police had to restrain you and take you to jail." I responded, "Do you want to discuss this in front of Nancy? Of course, she is my best friend. I share everything with her. I know you." I was unable to corroborate the allegations made by my mother. I requested an opportunity to present my account of the events in question. The two of them then proceeded to engage in a dialogue, during which I offered my perspective. I informed them that I had gone to retrieve my mother from a social gathering because I was concerned about her potential for consuming alcohol and subsequently operating a vehicle while intoxicated. I was then confronted by her employer, who launched a verbal assault against me, accusing me of being overly dominant and controlling. He made a series of unfounded accusations, many of which were not true. I informed her that I was not interested in her consuming alcohol to the point of impairment or with an individual who was similarly intoxicated. She then denied that such an incident had occurred. I was enraged and left, as I felt that she was being irresponsible. The following night, she was unable to walk properly. The next day, she informed me that we needed space and subsequently moved out. It is likely that she will become sexually involved with him. I am obliged to be frank with you, if she has sexual intercourse with one of the men, it will be the end of our relationship. I informed her about the nature of the work, but she said that I was old-fashioned. She was fashionably attired and did not heed my advice. I earn a good income, and she stated that I am not required to work. She also informed me that the funds required for my university education have already been deposited in my account. What is the best course of action regarding my moving in with my mother? Normally, I would recommend that you move in with your mother, but she associates with individuals of questionable character, so I am uncertain. Furthermore, I do not have the necessary resources to assist her. I am obliged to inform you that you are an adult and therefore expected to distinguish between right and wrong. You will have to make your own decisions without assistance from your mother or father. We both love you, so I suggest you take some time to reflect. I do not believe your mother requires an immediate response. I will consider your decision and discuss it with your mother. She will collect you tomorrow, and Nancy will stay with us for the night. I left the house at 2:00 in the morning. I conducted a search of Carol's whereabouts following her departure from the workplace. I discovered that she had proceeded to her residence, where she was joined by Jake for approximately half an hour. I subsequently returned home and retired for the night. The following morning, I arose and prepared breakfast for the children, who proceeded to wash the dishes. Patty informed me that her mother would be picking her up and that she would accompany her to deliver her decision regarding her future living arrangements. Nancy would also be joining us. Thereafter, both children questioned me extensively regarding the entire series of events. I was subjected to a form of trial by jury, with the children displaying a greater degree of intelligence than I had exhibited at their age. They demanded to know why I had not simply forced her into the vehicle on the first night. I explained that the men had labeled me as aggressive, and that it would have been highly conspicuous to have dragged her into the car. I was asked whether I still loved Mommy. I replied in the affirmative. I do not believe that I will ever cease to love her. At this point, a signal was heard in the yard from Carol, and the children departed with their suitcases. The time was 11. I returned to sleep, contemplating the possibility of her remaining with her mother to some extent. This would safeguard Carol from Jake, as Patty would be present continuously. I could only await communication from her at 7 p.m. Patty subsequently contacted me. Furthermore, she was in a state of distress, indicating that her mother was experiencing a significant degree of confusion. She appeared to be acquiescing to Jake's demands and absorbing his negative actions. If her mother did not regain her senses within a 1-month period, I would remain with my mother. Following this, I would return to reside with my former partner. We exchanged farewells and expressed our affection for each other. At 9 o'clock, Nancy contacted me. At 7 p.m., she provided a comprehensive account of the planned actions. Nancy concurred that Carol was not acting in a normal manner. We conversed with her for 3 hours, after which Jake arrived. Carol requested that Jake leave so that we could speak privately, but we wished to gain insight into his perspective, so we asked him to remain. I believe he is responsible for Carol's behavior. He would not have left anyway. What did you do to him to make him so angry with you? It did not take long for Patty and I to realize what an unpleasant individual he was. Jake made a foolish remark, and Carol concurred with him. If it were not so absurd, we would be laughing. Patty and I decided to intervene. She proceeded to the bedroom to devise a plan of action. She concluded that the optimal approach would be to remain with her mother and exacerbate the situation with Jake. She intends to persistently challenge her mother's behavior until she returns home at 4 a.m. We simply stay at her residence. We shall see how events unfold. By that time, Jake will be quite irate. I posited that a week would be sufficient, 2 at most. The other girls agreed to keep me apprised of developments. Upon my return from work on Friday, I discovered a tape on the table. It contained a family conversation between Nancy, Patty, and Carol. Patty had recorded the conversation. Nancy inquired about her mother's well-being, noting that her eyes appeared swollen and that she seemed to be lacking sufficient rest. She also commented on the presence of wrinkles on her mother's face. When her father was at the bar, Nancy questioned why her mother did not return home with him instead of going out. Regarding Jake, he departed before I could request his company. You did not inform your father that you were not intoxicated and that you would be fine accompanying Jake. However, we were not under the influence of alcohol. Why, then, were you sleeping on the couch? It is likely that the food was of poor quality. The children laughed loudly at this. Nevertheless, why did you even go? You were inebriated, and Jake was also under the influence of alcohol. Furthermore, you accompanied him. Why didn't you simply go with your father? She became visibly upset and stated, he followed me like I couldn't take care of myself. He waited in the parking lot for us to exit so that he could embarrass me. My parents were home with us throughout the night. He also left it with you to pick him up. He did not want you to drive under the influence of alcohol. It is Jake who is speaking, not you. If you wish for me to be entirely truthful, I must leave for work and see you in the morning. Patty and Nancy remained at my house throughout Sunday, as Carol was asleep. They informed me that we are unkind to Jake and that he is unaware of the distinction between us and the elderly. The individuals in question are humorous in nature. We set an alarm for the night, intending for one of us to wake up when she returns home with Jake for breakfast. However, we subsequently complain that Jake woke us up with a loud voice. Once we wake up, we remain with them until Jake leaves, before heading back to bed. Jake repeatedly instructs us to go to bed, but we persist in remaining awake. Patty stated, I am aware that you are unable to fully comprehend the situation. Consequently, next Saturday night, I will inform my mother of my intention to terminate this arrangement. I will be returning home, Dad. Patty proceeded to record the conversation and provide a copy to my father and me the following Saturday. At 00 in the morning, they listened to them and allowed them time to eat and wash the dishes. Jake then played some soft music on the CD player as they sat on the couch. The children proceeded down the hallway until they saw them sitting on the couch hugging each other. They waited until it became uncomfortably warm, at which point Jake removed her shirt and bra. They were unable to discern the extent of Jake's actions due to the lack of visibility caused by the darkness and the presence of only a street light. Nancy then activated the illumination, which revealed the nature of their activities. The confrontation was intense, resulting in Jake falling prone with his trousers lowered to his ankles. Carol was unable to locate the garment, and upon locating it, discovered it was inside out, with the bra positioned on the coffee table. Jake was on his knees attempting to retrieve his trousers, which proved challenging in this position. The girls then administered the school chants, a technique commonly employed at sporting events to rouse individuals from a state of unconsciousness. The entire block was affected by the commotion. My mother was unaware that we believed there was a burglar in the house. We were unaware that it was, in fact, she. Each of the girls was holding a lacrosse stick. My mother had placed her blouse inside out, and she was experiencing difficulty with it. My friends and I were frightened. I was experiencing a racing heart. Carol was unable to fasten her blouse because the buttons were on the inside. She pressed her hands to her chest as if no one could see or notice them. Carol said, "Well, it's just us, honey." Jake wasn't particularly friendly, standing there with a piece of his underwear hanging out of his fly and no shirt. "Why are the children awake at this time of night? Get out of here and go to bed where you belong," Jake shouted. The girls began to cry at the tone of his voice and the language he used. Patty said, "I happen to be at my house. Why don't you go home and have sex with your wife instead of my mom?" Carol stated, "Now, children, let's calm down and I must discuss this matter with my father. I will not remain in this environment any longer and I will no longer tolerate this behavior. I am tired of Jake's constant references to my father and his untruths. I am leaving before I start to believe his words. I cannot take it any more. I am sick of it. My father has never lied or told the kind of dirty truth that Jake puts out through his lying teeth. My father is twice as big as Jake will ever be. It all started simply because he loved you enough to make sure you got home safely after a social gathering was held, and then Jake proceeded to disseminate a series of allegations concerning my father. You promptly accepted these claims as truth. Jake asserted that he had never lied, whereas you maintained that he had checked on my mother in the parking lot throughout the night, when, in fact, he was at my residence. I did not state that he sat in the parking lot all night, I said that he probably did so. You claimed that he had insulted my mother, yet he left the item in the parking lot, and I had to retrieve it. He did not care about her. My mother informed him that she was not intoxicated, and you. Carol informed him that he would be fine, while her mother reassured him that she was not drunk. Carol then suggested that she accompany him, which her mother endorsed. However, Carol later clarified that she preferred to be with him, which her mother interpreted as meaning that Carol wanted to engage in sexual intercourse with her father. Jake then proposed that perhaps her father had broken into the house because he believed she was having sex with his wife. We had intended to engage in sexual intercourse this evening. However, given the noise levels, it would have been impossible to proceed. I am not going to my father's house today, as it is too late. Carol stated that we would be safer there than here. Nancy proceeded to the bedroom and called 911. She informed the operator that she wished to return home to her father, who had custody of her. She explained that her mother was intoxicated and that the couple was engaged in frequent altercations. She also stated that her mother would not allow her to leave. Patty attempted to leave the room, but Jake intervened. She informed him that he should never lay a hand on her in such a manner. They proceeded to engage in a heated exchange that lasted several minutes. Carol then proceeded to enter the room, and the alarm was triggered as a result of this action. The police arrived on the scene and began to follow the 911 call that Nancy had placed. Jake retrieved his firearm from the shelf and stated that he would take care of the situation permanently this time. He believed that Carol's husband was the individual responsible for the call. The police identified themselves and then proceeded to enter the room. Nancy joined Patty, and they began to express their emotions through tears. Jake then said, "What is the purpose of your presence here?" "You should leave immediately," Patty said. "You must comply with his demands. He has a firearm and is prepared to use it." The situation unfolded rapidly. The officers restrained Jake, handcuffed him, and confiscated his firearm. They then inquired about Patty's desired course of action. She expressed a desire to return home to her father. Carol offered to accompany her, but Patty declined, citing her inebriated state. The officer then directed a remark at Carol, suggesting that she was also under the influence of alcohol and in possession of a firearm. "A stolen vehicle, we will contact my husband to retrieve the children. Have you ever been detained by the police?" "Whatever you say, lady. Would you kindly put on appropriate attire and fasten your buttons? Are you engaging in sexual activity in front of minors?" That was the entirety of the recording, which concluded with my arrival at the scene where Jake was being placed into a patrol car. The officer then released the children, and we proceeded to our residence. The children sang throughout the journey. Upon our arrival, the police officers played the audio recording for me. I informed them that I would never cause them any distress and praised the children for their exemplary conduct. I prepared breakfast for the family and the children retired for the day to recuperate from their lack of sleep. I proceeded to clean myself, read the newspaper, and then listened to the audio recording once more. It was 7 p.m. when Carol arrived at our residence. I terminated the audio recording and woke up the children, who were eager to greet her upon her arrival. I observed her entering the house. Carol did not appear to be the same person who had left the house a few months prior. She sat at the kitchen table with the girls and I served her a cup of coffee. Patty asked, "Mom, should you be driving? Are you sober enough to drive? Can you send the youngsters to their room?" Carol responded that this was not the way things were done in the house. I asked Patty, "Are you sure you want to stay with your dad and not me?" She replied, "I'm sure. Mom. I just can't get along with your friends that you go to breakfast with. Furthermore, I have an aversion to Jake. I am unable to sleep when you engage in intimate displays in front of us. I will remain with my father. I am confident that he would take his daughters to the bedroom and engage in sexual intercourse with the door closed, rather than in plain view. Therefore, I suppose you will have to endure my presence, Patty. It seems that you have another guest, as your father is unlikely to allow me to return to you." Carol commented, "I suppose I should pack my belongings and move." Subsequently, Nancy emerged from her hiding place. "Has anyone inquired of Ken whether he takes boarders? We possess a spare bedroom with only a sewing machine and a bed, which occupies the entirety of the space. The price will be reasonable as well. Naturally, guests are not permitted." I replied that I did not believe I had many friends. "My father will do as I say." "There is no cause for concern, Mother. Let us proceed to retrieve." Patty stated that they went to retrieve her belongings from the flat and returned in 3 trips. I prepared the spare room, which she was compelled to use for her belongings. I informed her that there is a restroom down the hall that she and Patty would share. She indicated that this was acceptable, stating that Patty was her favorite. They embraced and shed tears. There were 3 women working in her room. I rested in front of the computer, which made it challenging to type with only one hand. Carol arrived after 10, please refer to page PM. After Patty had retired for the night and taken a seat on the sofa, she inquired as to the quality of the beer, suggesting that she might like to purchase one. I informed her that the house was at her disposal, with the exception of the master bedroom and bathroom, which were still the property of the previous occupants. She then asked if there was anything else she could help with, and proceeded to fetch us 2 beers, sitting next to me. She then asked how much her room would cost, suggesting that perhaps we should have discussed this before I relocated all my belongings to the house. I informed her that I would be happy to discuss the matter further, and asked where she was. I returned to the living room at 11 minutes to 3 Tuesday through Friday. I inquired about the potential for additional compensation from tips, noting that I was seeking approximately $5 or $600 per week. I emphasized that this was my primary objective regarding the room. I acknowledged that my initial proposal might have been somewhat informal, but I was serious about the financial aspect. She accepted the offer, and we proceeded to consume our beers before she retired for the evening. I then connected the recorder to the phone once more and proceeded to consume more beer before retiring for the night. This morning, Carol had already prepared coffee and bacon, which she had nearly finished preparing. She poured my coffee and set it next to me. We spoke for a bit before Patty joined us. Carol stated that after she took Patty to school, she was going to clean up the apartment for Jake. I informed them that they should leave it as is, as I had repainted the room. Carol then asked how about my wrist, which was hurting significantly. I informed her that I tried not to use it too often. I then proceeded to go to work, where I was overcome with a sense of unease. She had gone to clean up. I hoped Jake would call her from home or she would call him. I wanted to understand her rationale and ascertain her whereabouts upon my return. She informed me that I had not visited the flat. She would leave it as is. We would have dinner in 1 hour. I went to the workshop to check the tapes. She spoke with Mary and informed her that Jake was out of town until Thursday. I also overheard her tell Mary that John Elton was a silent partner who he owned the majority of the two firms, and he favored Carol. Therefore, he could not fire her. I proceeded to the upstairs area that night. Carol and I were situated in the office. Carol was watching television, and I was working on the computer. She inquired about my plans for the rent money she had paid me. She wanted to know if I recalled all of the reasons I had previously expressed my desire for her to refrain from working at that location. I glanced at her and asked if she remembered all of the reasons I had previously stated that I did not want her to work there. She replied in the affirmative. I provided her with a pen and paper and instructed her to record her recollections. I presented her with 10 reasons why I had previously advised against her employment at the bar. She proceeded to transcribe the list, beginning with the first item, "We don't need money." She then continued, listing the following reasons: "Everyone wants me to work unusual hours, this will put a strain on our relationship, this will cause complications for the family, you risk damaging your reputation, and 6. Males will engage in flirtatious behavior with me. 7 men will hug, kiss, and pass me. 8 men will want to see my breasts. The 9th men will want to seduce me, and the 10th men may put something in my drink." I inquired how many of these scenarios come true. She responded, "Nearly anything." "Are you happy now, Ken?" "Why should I feel happy? I did not want anything from the list to happen to you. I love you. I do not want someone to hurt you." She came up crying and said, "I am so sorry." I was enraged, Ken, believing that you were limiting my freedom. However, I subsequently realized that you were correct, and I was extremely disconcerted. What was I even thinking? We eventually kissed and hugged, and then Patty entered the room and stated, "Here's how a family should look." They subsequently retired to their respective quarters, leaving me alone. She received her remuneration on Thursday and requested my company at the designated location. She indicated that she would cover the cost of the meal, and I agreed. We convened at the pub at 5, the time was 10 p.m. She informed us that Patty was at NY's place and requested our company. We were in a restaurant when she completed her meal. She produced a $1,000 bill, which I acknowledged and placed in my pocket. She inquired if she should receive change for the $500 or $600 she had mentioned. I reminded her that I had already informed her of her earnings. I also reminded her that she had withdrawn additional funds from her pocketbook in previous weeks. I thanked her once more, and we proceeded to consume another drink and dance. When we sat down, a man approached her and requested a dance. She acknowledged him as Roger. He cast a glance in my direction and inquired as to whether he might dance with her. "I'm sorry, but she's already engaged for the evening." The proprietor of this establishment is a genial gentleman of approximately 72 years of age. He is prone to joking and jesting. He persistently requested to view her breasts. She then burst into uncontrollable laughter. 2 offices situated in close proximity to the playroom were secluded and challenging to discern from the exterior. I requested that Carol occupy the aforementioned office while I proceeded to enter the playroom. I informed Gypsy of an imminent revelation. He then emerged from the room and proceeded to sit with us in the office. Yippee, meanwhile, observed Carol's breasts with evident interest and a smile on his face as they conversed. I informed Gypsy that he had expressed a fondness for her and a desire to see her breasts. I then mentioned that he carries a photograph of her with him at all times. He responded by saying that he keeps the photograph in his shirt pocket, just above his heart. If she were to offer him a glimpse of the real photograph, he would prefer to show her the snapshot. Hippy Dippy retrieved the image and presented it to her when she noticed her partially clothed figure with her breasts exposed. Her face transformed, and she appeared to recognize both the outfit and the sofa she was sitting on. It was an unfortunate turn of events. "How did you obtain it, Hippy?" He then gave her the photograph. Gypsy observed her reaction and inquired as to whether she was upset with him for having a photograph of her. He clarified that he did not take the photo, he merely expressed his affection for her and was curious about her breasts. He apologized if his actions had offended her. Carol, however, seemed pleased when she saw the photograph and approached to show it to her. After viewing the photograph, she lifted her dress to display her breasts. He emitted a feigned scream and Carol hastily restored the garment to its original position before anyone became aware of her actions. Gypsy instructed her to retain the photograph, stating that its authenticity rendered it insignificant. We subsequently departed, and Carol expressed her gratitude with a smile, words of endearment, and physical contact. She entered my vehicle and urged me to drive. I was too distressed to operate the vehicle. She began to weep, and by the time we arrived at our destination, she was nearly in a state of composure. I inquired about the possibility of additional photographs. She was unaware that there might be more images than just this one. She began to weep once more, and I embraced her. Patty observed her emotional state and embraced her as well. I exited the vehicle. I excused myself from the room so that they could converse privately when I returned from my place of employment on Friday. I then proceeded to review the recording to ascertain whether Jake had contacted her. They were situated in Patty's room, with Nancy perusing the school yearbook. I was informed that dinner would be served in an hour, so I proceeded to the basement. I listened to approximately half an hour of their discussion. Jake requested her presence at his residence. At his residence, Carol informed him that she was not interested in pursuing a sexual relationship. She informed him that she had reconciled with Ken and would no longer be seeing him. In response, Jake stated that he had images of them engaging in sexual activity and that if she did not meet him, he would share those images with Ken. He further stated that he would publish them on the internet and distribute them throughout town if she did not meet him at 10 o'clock. And terminated the call. When she terminated the call, she became emotional. Carol invited me to have dinner with her, and she appeared to be in a poor state of mind. I embraced her and encouraged her to maintain a positive outlook, emphasizing that we would overcome this challenge together. She gazed at me with astonishment, as if to question the rationale behind my words. We proceeded to wash the dishes and watch the news. After that, I advised her to change her attire. We had agreed to meet for a few drinks. We proceeded to the bar, where Jake was organizing bottles of wine. We were seated at a table and had our orders taken. I turned around and noticed John Elton sitting at the table with his wife. As soon as he saw my wife, he waved and asked his wife to do the same. He later sent a bottle. Carol considered this gesture to be commendable. I informed him that I would express my gratitude. I proceeded to his desk and introduced myself. I thanked him for the wine and explained that I often come to the restaurant for lunch and enjoy the company of his wife. I inquired whether he would be willing to meet with me privately in Jake's office. He replied that he would be grateful if I would come to my law office. I do not conduct business outside of it. I believe you should listen to me since this impacts my wife, Carol, and your business here. His wife replied, "Go talk to him, honey." He rose up and we entered Jake's office. As he closed the door, I said, "I do not want Jake to come in." He locked the door. I rapidly described the situation. I informed him that Jake had made sexual advances towards my wife, which she had rebuffed. In response, he had drugged her and taken nude photographs of her. Now, he was attempting to extort money from her by showing her these images. I added that I was aware that he had called 2 locations with Jake and asked him to intervene. John claimed that he did not own anything, as it was all his father's. In regard to gambling, I am the proprietor of all relevant enterprises. He operates under a commission structure and has received compensation from me. I delivered the funds to his residence and vehicles in response to his father's situation. He is engaging in illicit activities and extortion. I will address these concerns and thank you for the information. I returned to our table, where I spent approximately an hour and a half in the office before joining his wife. They subsequently arrived and sat at our table, inquiring as to whether we would object to their joining us. He apologized to Carol and stated, "I have resolved the matter with the orchestra," and we all stood up to dance. After a while, he inquired whether I would object to dancing with his wife, citing the absence of music during the lunch hour. I replied that I would be delighted to dance with his wife. I observed Jake being led out of the pub by two imposing individuals. He attempted to break away, but we departed with John and his wife after midnight and drove home. I informed Carol of the events that had transpired. She expressed relief that he did not control the company and stated that she would resign regardless. She inquired about the fate of the money. I informed her that I had donated the items in question to the church. She stated that she would do the same. 3 months later, when we returned home, Patty was already asleep. We proceeded to consume beer and engage in conversation. Carol expressed remorse for the difficulties she had caused. I was convinced of the veracity of Jake's assertions. I am uncertain as to the origin of the notion that your statements regarding occupational hazards and the potential for adverse events influenced my thinking. I assumed that I was misguided in my assumption that I could handle whatever you said. I was, in fact, caught in a trap. I was unprepared for the situation. Carol stated that I was prepared to depart with you when you came to pick me up from the club. However, I spoke to Jake, who suggested you were terrified of being taken away. This made me angry, but I was confident that I could handle anyone. Therefore, I went with him. Then, several other guys paid me a lot of attention. I felt a sense of significance and elation at the prospect of being courted by numerous individuals and invited out for meals. I did not perceive their overtures as merely a means of seduction, rather, I sensed a desire to restrict my autonomy. I asserted that I had never reprimanded you for working at the establishment until you relocated to live with your sister. Even when the female companions moved in with me, my mind remained perplexed. I was only able to discern the truth when the women turned on the lights. I felt a profound sense of insignificance in that role. Subsequently, I was compelled to remove my top, as it was inappropriately positioned. I located my attire but discovered that it did not fit correctly. It was inside out, and I was unable to fasten it, so I simply held it towards me to conceal my breasts. I informed her that I regretted not having witnessed the incident. Jake was visibly distressed, stumbling over his attire. The females vocalized their displeasure at a volume that could have been heard throughout the building. I believe this was the stimulus that prompted me to become fully aware of my surroundings. Otherwise, I would have remained in a state of unconsciousness. I had sexual intercourse with him that night. You likely despise me now, given that you informed me of everything as if you could predict the future. If you ever turn to me, I will never question you for as long as I live. I do not want to live without you. I find it difficult to believe what I just did to you. She sat there crying. I am grateful for Patty and Nancy. If it hadn't been for them, I might not have survived. I do not want to consider what others think of me. How can I protect her from boys if I am unable to manage my own life? I am uncertain as to whether she will ever be willing to listen to me again. Carol, the children adore you and simply want you to return home. They will never stop loving you. I will never stop loving you. They will always ask you for guidance. You are their mother and the primary caregiver in their family. I believe, at my core, that they will continue to adore me. However, I am unable to do the right thing for myself. My thoughts were muddled by the desire for the bar gang to like me more led to a period of physical affection on the couch. I informed her that she might return to the bedroom. It had been 5 years since the tragedy. Patty is currently attending college, and our situation is stable. Thank you for taking the time to read today's story. If you enjoyed this article, please like and subscribe. If you have a story to tell about your own or someone else's experience, please do not hesitate to contact me.